This is Dear Strategy, episode 134. Welcome to another episode of Dear Strategy, where we answer all of your questions about product, business, and personal strategy. I'm your host, Bob Caparelli. This is episode 134, recorded in June of 2023. So welcome back, strategy creators. This is another great episode coming up. You'll see right away that I've changed the opening just a little bit, answering all of your questions about product, business, and personal strategy. Why did I add that in there? Well, as I announced in the last episode, I want to try and get into some other areas of strategic thinking, not only, kind of corporate strategy or product management strategy for their products or services. Those are still important things and will still be important parts of the show. But I'm also going to start to segue that into how you can apply those strategic concepts into your personal strategic thinking as well. And that personal strategic thinking can be applied to business, can be applied to your personal life, can be applied to career, can be applied to anything that you want, and even other scenarios within real life, which is what we're going to be talking about in today's episode. So today's episode is something I've actually been wanting to talk about for quite a while, but I've been a little bit afraid to. I think I was taught early on, never mix politics and business. But even though people do it all the time at levels that we're probably completely uncomfortable with, but that's a whole different story. I've tried to make it a rule to not do that. And the truth is also, as far as my association with any given political party, I try to remain pretty neutral. I probably lean a little more one way towards another, but depends on the day and the policy and the person and all kinds of things. So I guess I would be considered an independent voter by all definitions. And that's important, at least to me, for the context of this week's episode, because I'm going to be talking about the strategy of politics. I'm not going to take a side on politics. I'm not going to say Democrats are bad, Republicans are great, Republicans are bad, Democrats are great. I'm not going to do any of that kind of thing, right? I think they all equally have issues at the moment. And I want to talk about why that might be from a strategic standpoint. So, of course, this show is directed mostly at people who are, participating in corporate strategy, business strategy, things of that nature. And what I want to do is bring us back to the basic concepts of business strategy, talk about how that might apply to political strategy, and see if maybe some people can change maybe their thought process around the way they think about politics today based on some of these concepts, or at least just question some things, right? And that's really what I'm hoping to accomplish here today. So let's go back to the principles of basic business strategy, right? Pretty simple. We've talked about it about 1,000 times on this show. But business strategy consists of taking some view of the world around you, having some goal of what you want to accomplish, and based on that goal and that view, put together a plan that will allow you to achieve the goal based on the situation that you find yourself in or that you expect to find yourself in, right? That's strategy in a nutshell. And in business strategy, we look at it through the lens of three basic things, right? Our company, which consists of our capabilities, our culture, our values, who we are, who we stand for, what we stand for, those types of things, right? And of course, our capabilities. Then the second piece is our customers. So who are the customers we want to serve? What are their needs? What kinds of products do we want to give them to satisfy some of their needs and solve some of their problems? So that's kind of that second piece. And then the third piece is, of course, the competitive landscape. Who is in our way, right? Who are our competitors? Who is fighting for those same customers? Who's fighting for the same goals? And what do we want to do to be different, stand out amongst those different competitive choices? So we take all of those inputs, we use them to put together a plan that will allow us to achieve our goal based on what we think those inputs are going to look like, either now or in the future. And that becomes our strategy, right? It's pretty simple, pretty basic concepts. Now, here's the trick though. as consumers of products that businesses are providing to us, we serve as a checkpoint for business strategy. What do I mean by that? Well, if a company says that they want to provide a certain product, they want to do a certain thing, they want to stand for a certain thing, and they're going to serve their customers in a certain way, customers are going to take a chance on that by buying whatever it is that those companies are selling. But if what those companies were selling does not make good on the promises or doesn't match what the customers were ultimately promised, then the customers will stop buying those products and will stop patronizing those companies, right? So that's the checkpoint. And it's a very important checkpoint because it keeps companies honest to their strategy. They don't have the ability to say, here's what we're going to be, here's what we're going to do, and then not do it, right? At least not for the long term, because customers will ultimately say, you're not doing what you said, and it's not working for me, so we're going to go elsewhere. So that checkpoint is super important in business strategy. It keeps companies honest to their own plan. Now, some checkpoints are not quite as straightforward or direct as what I have just described, because some products or services are not as easy to validate or verify if the claims that companies made are actually something that the products can do. So let's take an example, like a weight loss pill, right? A weight loss pill is a product that a company makes certain claims around, but you need to use that in conjunction with diet and exercise and all kinds of other things. So it's not as straightforward as saying, I take this pill, I lose weight definitively, and it's all because of the pill. So I have to kind of rely on some level of trust in the company, and also the product has to do something around what it said, right? But it's not quite as easy to validate. Now, in cases like that, company strategies will be more focused on advertising, promotion, marketing, right? Because we need to, yes, have a decent product, but we also have to make sure that we tell people very clearly what this product is going to do and what this product is doing, even though you may not know it's doing it, right? So lots more money spent on advertising, promotion, things of that nature. Now, there are still checkpoints in that case because, again, the product does somewhat have to perform to some extent, but there are other checkpoints in the form of competitive claims, right? So if the product absolutely is baloney, then the competitors will surely call the company out on that. There's also advocacy groups and laws in place that prevent companies from out and out lying or falsifying claims or things of that nature. So still checkpoints, just not quite as direct. And the less and less that you can validate whether a product does what it says it's going to do, the more you have to rely on these other checkpoints being in place because the direct checkpoint is missing. Now imagine a world where companies did not have those last checkpoints. What do I mean by that? So take the weight loss pill, right? There are other checkpoints in place in the form of competitors, regulatory agencies, things of that nature. If that didn't exist and the companies can literally just lay claim to whatever they want without having to be completely honest about it all, then I guarantee you the strategy would be all around convincing, promoting, advertising, marketing, making people believe that the product does something when in actuality it might not be doing something. And, that's clearly where the company would put their money because they don't have to put their money into making a product that works. Instead, they'd put their money into advertising a product that they say does what it's supposed to do. And that just kind of makes sense. Now, obviously, ethically, that would be completely wrong, but it would be a valid strategy if that was the situation that existed. So if we buy into all of those concepts around company strategy, business strategy, product strategy, And we accept that that's probably the way things are and the way things would go if all those checkpoints were removed. Now let's try and translate this into political strategy. So I think we could agree that for political strategy, the direct checkpoint is probably not completely there. Again, the direct checkpoint being, I say the product is going to do something and it does it. Well, that in the political world would be the equivalent of, I say I'm going to do something and I do it. And you could validate that and verify that, in real time. Well, that's hard to do, right? Because there's a lot of different dynamics that are going on behind the scenes that we as voters would never really know about. So we elect someone to office. They say they're going to do a whole bunch of things and they get in there. We don't really know if they're working towards those things or not. We don't really know if they are getting all those things done. And when things are not happening, we don't really know if it's because this person isn't trying or because there are other forces at work that the person has no control over. So it's really, really difficult to keep that in check. We don't know if they're doing what they said they were going to do. Maybe a little bit, but kind of more like the weight loss pill than a direct product, right? So that direct checkpoint, probably not there, or at least not as prominent. So now you have to rely on those secondary checkpoints that we talked about, right? Which is some other forces that will keep their claims in check. So someone to go in and check to see if they did what they said they were going to do, or are doing what they said they were going to do, or are standing for what they said they would stand for. And I would say in the political world, those checkpoints mostly would be in the form of some type of journalists, media that are kind of neutral, right, in the way that they view things. And their job is to go in and really keep the politicians in check. Hold them to account, make sure that we, the public, know what's really going on behind the scenes so that that checkpoint can at least partially exist. And that would be kind of the equivalent in our weight loss pill analogy of competition, regulatory agencies, any of those other checkpoints that have to exist behind the scenes. That gives us confidence that whatever someone is claiming is probably close to true, or at least not completely false. Okay, so if all that works in politics, then the strategy of politicians and political parties would need to be, we need to do what we said we're going to do. We need to perform for our constituents because those checkpoints are going to exist. And if we don't perform, we're going to be held to account in some way. If not directly, then indirectly. But if the media is not completely neutral, or the media is aligned with one party or the other, or parts of the media are aligned with one party and parts of the media are aligned with the other, and those parties know that the people that are aligned with them are watching this one, the people that are aligned with the other one is watching that one, and we can more or less control the messages that we want our constituents to hear and repeat and so forth through these media channels, because these media channels are aligned with us, and few, if any, competitive messages are ever going to get through, then effectively that secondary checkpoint is removed. And that becomes a problem. Now, it becomes a problem if you think it's a problem. I think it's a problem. I guess that's a matter of opinion. From a strategy standpoint, the political strategy around something like that would be lock up the media channels, align with them, and make sure that the messages you're sending through the right places to the right people at the right times. And you can be pretty well assured that you can claim whatever you want to claim. And half the country is not going to question it, or whoever it is that's watching those channels that you're aligned with. And so the strategy would be more and more and more about promoting, advertising, marketing, making sure that the media is aligned with your message, and less and less about performing, doing, delivering, right? And the more those checkpoints become removed, the more this self-perpetuates and the worse this situation becomes. What I've just described to you, in my opinion, I am not a political strategist. I do not work with companies that do political strategy. In my opinion, based on my observation, that situation that I just described is more and more where we are, where we're going, and why the polarization exists today. And it makes sense because media has become much more accessible and therefore much more powerful and therefore a much bigger part of politicians and political parties' strategies. So it makes sense that that's where we are. Doesn't mean it's good, but I understand it. So the purpose of me talking about this is not to get preachy, not to sway you from one side to another or anything else. Like I said, I'm neutral. I'm in the middle. What I'm mostly interested in is if you are unhappy with kind of the polarization that exists in the country, the world, whatever else, try and view what's happening through the lens of all the strategic tools that we've been talking about on this show forever, right? Think about it through the same standpoint you would if you were developing a company strategy, a business strategy, a product strategy. And I think you might kind of see what is behind some of what's going on. Again, the golden rule, the more checkpoints that are there, the more the strategy has to focus on performance. The less checkpoints that exist, the more the strategy is going to focus on messaging. And, where do you want this to be? I want politicians and political parties that perform, not just message. And so in order to get that, what do I need to do? What I need to do is get my information from as many places as possible. Because if I get my information from only one source, and that source is aligned with only one party, then I can be pretty well assured that I'm not getting the entire picture. I'm getting a very slanted view. I'm swallowing that. I'm also swallowing the view that if I get information from anywhere else, it's going to be wrong, or people who are getting information from anywhere else are evil, right? Those are all things that are perpetuated as part of this strategy. And so if I allow myself to fall victim to that, fall into that trap, then I am responsible for the future strategy of do more of that, right? Focus more on the messaging, focus more on the advertising, the promotion, and less on the doing. But if I do require that information comes from multiple places, and I realize that there is a different view than just the one channel that I might be going to, then I am effectively putting those checkpoints back into place, which is effectively going to cause the political parties and their political strategists to have to focus on performance rather than just messaging. And that's the world that I would prefer to live in personally, but that's just, again, my opinion. So I hope this is a little bit helpful to anybody who might have something like this on their mind. Again, not trying to preach at you, but think about it through this lens and draw your own conclusions. And maybe you'll see things a little differently and see how maybe you can help to turn things the way that you would want to turn them, and holding political parties and holding politicians to account the same way we do with companies, which I think is the right place to be. So if you enjoyed this episode, you have anything to say about it, any comments, any questions, feel free to go to dearstrategy.net, use the contact link. You can get us over there. You could also suggest a future topic for a future episode. I'm happy to take all of those suggestions as well. And while you're doing all of that, don't forget to make time for the plan. We'll see you back here on another episode of Dear Strategy. Thanks for joining.